I've actually gotten
Whoops,
pretty
that's a
good
fuzz.
at lining all our tracks up, so I think we should press on.
Nails.
Lee, press on nails.
Speaking of Lee Press on Nails, we have a special guest
major
today.
Source of income. Oh, sorry.
A writer, a poet, philosopher, and his name is an adverb ending, Lee. Hi, Lee.
Hi.
Hey.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on. We'll have you again on soon.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you. It was a great experience.
Wrong. The cavalry was bereft of all sustenance, and the poor young boys, some of them were 16 and lied about their age to get into the cavalry. They were bereft of video games and other screens and technology. In a civil war, there were no iPads. The iWatch had not been invented yet, but there was an Atari 2600. You're listening to episode 25 of Time to Lean, and here's a song. This is a leap-episode, episode 25. Generally, we'll be reporting shortly. For a duty, such as it were.
Deeply touching.
Why don't you tell us all a little bit about yourself?
Well, the first thing I wanted to say is that John was mentioning that he doesn't like Skype, and so I was trying to give him a thumbs up. It's like this fist that kind of erects a thumb, and it's like it does it like over and over and over. It's like it's this erectile thumb that just keeps erecting, and I'm like,
I'm not down with
it's
that.
huge, and that's what's weighing on me right now.
Well, you should probably turn that off.
Yeah, I think, let's see if hopefully it's not still going.
The way the Skype interface works, he'd probably end up erasing everything on his computer.
Yeah, I'm not going to touch anything.
Sick bay. You guys have known each other for longer than I've known John even. Didn't you go to Wilson grade school together or something?
We've known each other for
we're
about
just
200
right
years.
in, huh?
Well, I don't know. Okay, we'll go backwards.
Phil's
do you
not into
drink?
foreplay.
What are you drinking?
No. No, I'm sorry. I'm eating my cereal.
Oh, what are you eating? What kind of cereal do you like? Let's talk about cereal.
All in good time.
I'll come back later.
You come back. No. I'm sorry. I'm just haven't been awake that long because it's morning.
Okay, yes, we could talk about that.
That's novel. No, just for the record, I'm eating frosted mini wheats with a not aged statement, 1% milk.
It's bottled in bond.
It's not bottled in bond. I buy the cheap stuff.
Age statement.
And I'm having coffee.
They don't have missing people on the back of bottles anymore. I kind of miss that.
So many of them are on plastic containers. They'd have to screen print them or something.
Yeah.
And then they'd go in the recycling and you'd see all these missing kids being crushed or melted down.
That's disturbing.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so like, how do we get our lost children fixed today?
Without the milk carton to factor. I guess that's what the Amber Alert does now, huh?
There's various alerts.
So I think John and I met in like first grade.
Yes.
And he and I were the tallest kids in our class.
That's what stood out for you.
That was our moment of superiority and importance.
It only lasted for that one grade.
And Mrs.
Probably.
Anderson, right? Her class?
I think so.
Yeah. Chuck
Pretty
Anderson's wife.
Oh,
yeah.
And then many, many years later, we had her husband for math in high school.
Yes.
Which, it's a little too early to start in on that, so we'll save that particular experience for a little later.
You don't want to jump into Chuck Anderson? John doesn't want to jump into anything today.
I'm very tentative.
There's sensitive topics.
Some of this stuff is just it just brings a gusher of.
It requires vulnerability.
Exactly. That's right. Yes, first grade. We go back a long, long time.
When did you guys start hanging out or whatever, doing role playing and stuff like that. Was that quite a bit later?
Years later.
Like junior high?
That was like, no, earlier. That was
okay.
Yeah.
Sixth or seventh grade.
Probably were in,
for me.
when you look at like D&D.
It wasn't around yet.
Earliest versions of D&D, I remember maybe what's considered the second wave of the books and everything that they put out. The very first ones, I don't think I ever saw those, but the ones after that, we had those. And of course, my brother Rob was a major component of that too.
Yeah, that was a really, like, believe it or not, like, I remember when I first heard about it.
Yeah.
That John and I were hiking back in the canyon at the end of St.
The hiking
Pat.
place, we used to call it.
Yeah, and I remember, like, where we were walking, and you just said out of the blue, have you ever heard of Dungeons and Dragons? And I instantly, I didn't know what it was. I had no idea what it was, but right when you said that, I had this sensation of revelation and excitement. Yeah, seriously. Mm-hmm. And I still have a vivid memory of, like, you were walking like 2 or 3 feet in front of me. It's like I have an imprinted memory of it. And then when we actually played, I think Rob was the dungeon master, and I remember that my character had fallen into a pit, and there was a giant rat in it, and this giant rat was going to attack me, and I was going to use my bow and arrow, and I was going to try and shoot the rat with the arrow, and I had to, roll these weird dice to find out what happened, and I was totally blown away.
Cool.
I was just like, it was like a religious...
So fun.
Yeah, it was like an otherworldly... It's like a whole nother dimension of reality opened up. To have, because I'd always loved make-believe and stories and making things up, and then realizing, well, there could be stories where they're made up, but there's like kind of a logic and there's rules to it. There's a way to randomize it. So not just saying, oh, you got shot. No, you didn't, or, whatever. There's an actual way to resolve what happens, and then you can create these stories with your friends.
And it was interactive.
And very interactive.
Extremely.
Unlike just telling somebody a story.
It still was a game in the best possible way.
Yes.
And then you all became Satanists.
Yes.
Pretty much.
Because that was the stepping stone.
Yeah.
It was a gateway drug.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the cover of the DM's Guide or something.
Yeah, it had a giant demon on it.
Yeah, it was a giant demon on it. So.
Well, there you go.
The first AD&D book, I think it was.
Is that advanced?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not advanced.
Code.
I didn't do much on that. Much later I would come in, but mostly we would just make characters and funny names and have fun, and then we'd start something and play till 3 a.m. and couldn't finish it or something.
Yeah, that happened.
That was later on, but
that was much later.
Yeah. In the early days we were pretty committed. Though it was always a bit of a challenge to corral Rob. He didn't want to be pinned down.
Oh no.
He's still like that.
Yeah.
As far as I know.
Yeah, no, it's a personality. it's a temperament thing.
That was one of the things you rolled on your character that wasn't. They should have put on there caginess or unavailability.
Availability low.
Well, it could have been elusiveness.
Or it would be a saving throw, like save versus organization. Or
like Rob would have been a chaotic available, maybe. Or...
I always loved those.
Sometimes
those alignments, yeah. Which in the original basic game were like what, good, neutral, and evil.
Yeah, just 3.
With pretty basic, and then they had to have all the chaotic and neutrals and.
Which actually,
of course,
still
everybody
works.
wanted chaotic good because they wanted to be a good guy, but they also wanted to be just slightly free to do whatever they wanted.
Right.
Well, a good is so boring.
Well, nobody wanted to be lawful good. I mean,
lawful
that's
good, right?
Wow. They could have found an interesting way to play it, but few people wanted to try it. You'd end up just sounding like a sanctimonious. Oh, well, we need to do that's not right.
Yeah, or God forbid, play a paladin or something like that, where you're the ultimate goody two shoes.
Paladin needs elf badly.
Exactly.
No, wait, that wasn't right. That was a video game. So then at some point you were like, Rob, I don't want to be in this pit with a rat anymore. I'm going to be the dungeon master. So at some point you took over.
Yeah.
Well, I think part of it, if I remember correctly, was we probably started out playing published modules. Modules were of course the pre-written adventures that you would buy at Who's Hobby or wherever we got our stuff in those days. And
on the corner.
And there weren't that many available
From the dealers at the corner.
You know, they weren't that cheap for kids to just buy them all. So I think it was both a desire to do something on our own, but also economic necessity that if you wanted to keep coming up with new adventures to play, that you're going to have to roll your own, so to speak. Oh, bit of funny.
Yes.
Lee embraced that role as a kind of a natural author and storyteller. Make him sound like the fantasy Garrison Keillor or something. But
which would be Gary Gygax.
Well, sideline. Yeah, Lee really got into that in a big way, I think. It kind of became this interesting outlet, I think, if I don't speak for you. For a lot of your story ideas and things that maybe eventually work their way into other writing.
Oh yeah, there's kind of still elements of it that show up in what I'm doing now. So I think like we started, like the big thing, of course, was the campaign, which was so monumental it did not even require a name.
No, we called it the Big C.
Yeah, and
yeah.
I think we started that in 9th grade. When we were in 9th grade, or maybe 10th grade even, I'm not sure. I want to say 9th, but
we were quite
I think it was maybe
well-seasoned players by that time.
Yeah, and then did that for 5 years. And
that's commitment.
One of the actual benefits to Rob's inaccessibility at times would be, like we would need him, like the characters got separated, and so, but we would need to get them sort of synchronized in the same time, or if they're going to influence what's going to happen to each other. So we'd be waiting for something Rob needs to do, his character needs to do, to get, for that to be resolved before we can really carry on with everybody together.
Oh, man.
But because the characters were separated at those times, very often in sort of, space, they're in different places, John and I would still get together, and his character would just wander around his home territory talking to different non-player characters. So we would just sit around for hours.
And it wasn't even it wasn't like we were having encounters and rolling lots of dice and things like that. We were just doing just riffing and talking about ideas and having these conversations with other non-character players. I'm sorry, non-player characters.
NPCs.
And studying the map and talking about the world situation, the political situation in the world. And
yeah, because at that point our characters were well beyond the trapped in a pit with some rats. We were leading armies and having lots of intrigue, and there was tons of stuff going on that it got very big. And the funny thing that, especially by the time we got to that stage, the game part of it had gone so far into the background that it was kind of unusual to pull out the dice and look at the tables and stuff to resolve the situations.
Yeah, it was an event.
It was usually some world-changing event. But the other thing that when I played the game later with other people as an adult, those few times I did, a lot of them would use like miniatures and put out the dungeon grids and draw stuff, and it was much more of a game right. For that. And we didn't really get into that whole thing. We're moving a bunch of figures around, and that's something that seemed a little. I mean, it's kind of fun in its own way, but it wasn't like that.
Yeah, we maybe experimented a little with it, but we didn't. It didn't quite work, and I guess to me, it's almost like a form of idolatry. It's like you don't want to think about your character as being this piece of lead or whatever right on the table. It's like you want to. This needs to be alive in your head,
right?
And to think
so
of it, to turn it into a board game to me was kind of dramatically would be a step backwards.
Yeah, it definitely felt more like a board game than what we had done as relying on your imagination.
Yeah, and I was not, and still am not, into rules. I think a minimum of rules is kind of the best, at least for what I was interested in doing. That you just need something. Like, does it really matter if you use 2 or 3 factors to come up with a number that you need to roll, or is it better to have 50 of them? It's still a number. You need a number that you're trying to hit.
Yeah, and there has to be some random chance involved, like there is in everything.
Yeah.
But I think that just enough of that. And it's interesting that the whole D&D and role playing world in general is big enough to really include everybody. That people like us who just wanted the simple, don't let the rules get in the way thing, but also the people that really, really obsessed, and still do, I think, with all the different types of rule systems and tables, and which version of the rules is best.
And painting miniatures.
There's lots and lots of and the miniature painting is its own little subset of people that express themselves that way, and that's kind of the great thing about it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
That it includes that. It's a pretty big tent, so to speak.
Yeah, there's a whole range of, again, that sort of idea of temperament or personality. That are some people just really love the granularity and all these details and the figures and the rules, arguing about rules stuff. And
we always thought it was more of a joke about people having huge knockdown dragouts about versions and things like that.
And I think part of the reason for that is that our approach, I always felt, was that we were trying to create like this really awesome story and give these characters kind of multiple dimensions and give them something to do and something to care about, and to have what they do matters in this imaginary world. And so if that's job one, if the central goal is to create this amazing story together, then the rules can quickly become an enemy if you get too hung up on them.
But even before that, though, you had my limited experience with it. We'd start out, you'd have all this detail and maps, and I think I was just always amazed about. Well, I still am with how it's developed into your books and your maps and stuff like that. But the amount of detail, a backstory, and maybe things you might not ever call upon. But I always thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes it gets out of hand.
Yeah,
and you can kind of build up so much backstory or so much context. Yeah, that you it weighs you down. So there's a balance, but
yeah,
but I mean, I love that stuff. So I love backstory, and I love kind of creating worlds and having a larger context that all this is happening in. And really, and the most fun thing about it really was sharing it with you guys when we would play these games. That was the main thing, and just wondering, keeping it open enough so that the players would actually materially contribute to what happens. So I wouldn't know. I wouldn't have, this is the end point where this is going to end. It's going to end in this situation. It's like, sometimes there'd be things like that where it's like, well, I'm pretty sure this is where this is going to end up. But other times it'd be like, well, we'll just leave it open and see what they decide to do. Like, do they want to go to this country or this country? Do they want to pursue this mystery or that mystery? Do they have this question or that question? And it's like, I would just respond to that and try to, kind of reward them for their questions and ideas. And sometimes I would steal their theories. They'd be like, hey, maybe this is what's going on. I'm like, hey, well, that's better than what I was thinking.
Yeah, but you also you put a tremendous amount of time into it as well. I have a lot of memories of you emerging from your dad's office with a bunch of computer printouts of stuff that you were slaving over that ancient computer with the monochrome screen and everything, and tons of work that you'd put into those. So
yes, and another thing that I think back on is just how, when I would be doing the DMing, that I would go into this zone that it was, almost like a trance.
Yeah.
And I don't remember ever sitting there going, oh my gosh, what do I do, or what happens next, or what do I say, or what is this character? How's this non-player character going to react? It was like I was like literally in that world, and I knew what was going to happen, and I knew what to say, and I knew everything I needed to know. There was like no outside reality when I was doing that. And that's a level of concentration that I've not been able to maintain. So,
well, but you still
now I suffer from the same thing everyone else suffers. I'm like working on my book, and I'm like, wonder what Trump's up to. I better go check on him.
Yeah, part of that's our world now too, but
yes,
it's easy to do. That's why a lot of, like, for example, I know you hear people talk about who do write for a living, especially who basically create situations where they can still work on a computer-like device, because that's what everybody uses now to write, but have it set up so that there's no chance of anything else butting in on that. So because just writing on a computer today is got so much crap going on in the background. That's easy
possibility
for things to pop up. Yeah, I mean, even if you turn off all notifications and you're just staring at a Word document, it's so easy to just click over to something else.
And it's there. It's all buzzing kind of behind this, behind the page you're looking at. There's information and news and
because of the internet, really, and modern computing, that's completely changed all that. Some people, when they read, like to get the super dumb Kindles, for example, that all they really can do is display text because they just can't concentrate. And I understand that. I totally do.
Yeah, well, I probably need something like that.
And they also make like Mac software that will lock everything out.
Oh,
but a certain thing for a certain number of minutes or hours.
Set a timer.
And that you have to deliberately override it to look at anything else.
Right. Because I think that is a big part of the trick, because when your brain flips from the thing you're supposed to be working on to something else, and you respond to it, it happens so quickly that you don't have a chance to intervene, and then it's kind of too late. But anything that would put a little bit of a built-in pause to give you a chance,
right. That you're,
to say, hey, whoa, wait a minute,
you're making a conscious decision to.
This is Satan. This is Satan that's trying to draw me from.
Well, when I write on the computer, I mean, sometimes I want to look something up, like on Wikipedia or a spelling or something like that, or maybe it's like that isn't the right word, so I'll get on a thesaurus or something. And I mean, not that I do an awful lot of writing on my computer, but I actually dug out my old thesaurus and dictionary and stuff because
paper ones,
because I was like, but even with the dictionary, I mean, I have attention deficit issues as it is, but a dictionary, you're like going through trying to look up a word, and you get down a little rabbit hole in the dictionary, and you're like, hey, that's a cool word.
But that's a good rabbit hole.
Hey, here's another word. Well, yeah, but still, you're like, or a rat hole, I guess as we say in the D&D world.
Yes. I was in the rat pit.
Why did it suddenly become about rats?
Well, I was in the rat pit. That was my first D&D encounter with Rob in the rat pit. I don't remember what happened. I think I shot it, and I did manage to kill it after it maybe jumped at me and bit me.
Was it a larger than normal rat?
Oh yeah, it was a giant rat. It's
a were-rat?
The keep on the Borderlands?
4 or 5 feet long.
Oh, you don't want to
big rat.
You don't want to be in a hole with that.
No.
Even a regular rat could give you rabies.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to turn us back to that subject, but just one other D&D related comment. So obviously, I worked, that was like the center of my life for years, working on these stories with you guys, and but I remember like when I got for my birthday, I got a D&D set, and I remember I was like trying to design my own, not an adventure. I was nowhere near able to do that, but just like a scenario. And the first thing I could come up with was, okay, there's this room, this sort of barren room, like concrete or stone, and there's this like a boxy kind of smaller room in there, like a kennel, like almost like a dog, like for a dog, but pretty big. And there's like a big wolf in there. Like that was my first. That was the best I could come up with.
Well, it sounds
so no
intriguing.
stories, no story, no character, just the scenario. Okay, there's a room with this kind of bunker in there, and it's black, through this little door, and there's this nasty wolf or big dog that's going to come out and attack whoever comes into the room.
Well, see, now that gets kind of into like improv, because you'll get a, the audience will say, you're in a room with a cage and there's a wolf. And
yeah. Well, and that's sort of my point, that these things have like very small, simple beginnings. And so that's one of the things that I always, would want to say to people who are interested in creativity is don't, kick yourself for not having the best idea right away or knowing what to do right away.
Or 3 notebooks filled with maps and details.
Yeah, because
you just start with the thing.
Going to start tiny, no matter what, or thinking about, learning to, play music. I mean, some little kid that's first starting, everybody's it's gonna be rough and simplistic, and
got to build your muscles.
And that's the truth with so many things, that you need to be bad before you have any chance of being good, and you're not really bad because that's part of the process. Just like you don't say with like some toddler, make fun of them because they're having trouble walking. Oh, you can't walk. It's like, they're going through the process. And
the thing is, most people do instinctively understand that the walk before you can run theory, but I think but with something like writing or storytelling or anything like that, or any kind of creative endeavor, it's a little bit fuzzier because well I already know how to use the English language competently. Why can't I write a novel?
Yeah, well, that's, and there's also an element of, there's this sort of mystique about creativity that somehow, people will say, oh, so-and-so, they're so talented.
Yeah.
And, I don't think that's actually very helpful. I don't, explaining things in terms of quote-unquote talent.
It's far too fuzzy, I think.
Yeah, and like with myself, for instance, someone could say, oh, wow, you're so, you're very talented creatively. And I've thought, well, maybe, but also maybe not. Maybe I'm below average. Maybe I'm actually naturally below average. And the reason I've gotten so much better at it is because I loved it so much that I worked hard. So maybe it's not talent, it's love. Maybe if you love something, you get good at it, even if you're not naturally good at it.
The the founder of the Suzuki violin method, guy named Suzuki, has famously said that he does not believe there's such a thing as musical talent. That it's really all about how the work they put in and how people are taught and things like that.
I think with anything, it's like a spectrum. I mean, I doubt there's somebody that's just born with an incredible talent and they just come out of the box like that. But I'm thinking that there's some kind of spectrum with anything. Some people work harder.
Brains are wired differently, and there's you have to account for a little bit of that. But I think overall, it's far less important than people generally think.
I mean, you, John, as far as the bass, I mean, you have perfect pitch, and I've gathered that when you were younger, you didn't practice very much, but yet you're a very good bass player. So I think on the spectrum there,
perfect pitch isn't as useful as you might think, though.
No.
Just because you're out of tune or know you're out of tune doesn't mean you magically can play in tune.
No, it would be a curse more than anything.
Actually, it can be in certain situations. The most useful it ever is
party games.
Well, party games. That's just kind of dumb. But, hey, what's this note?
Hey, do a B flat.
It's like the best use of it for me is if I'm in a playing situation and somebody plays a tune that I don't have the music for. It's usually something simple that I follow something fairly familiar, like a standard jazz song or something like that, and I can hear the key that the piano player, say, is playing and follow it.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so I can lock onto that pretty well, and that has helped me out a couple of times. But most of the time, it's much less important though than you would think.
But even that came from practice too. So
Well, a lot of it, I think, and I have a theory about this. The perfect pitch thing. Of course, it's not 100% perfect, I'm sure, but the
close enough.
I think when I was really young, so all of us Knowles kids were made to take piano lessons.
Forced.
In some ways, it was a massive waste of money on my parents' part because none of us can play the piano today. And that's not for years of lessons and trying.
It laid the groundwork for other things, though.
Yeah, no, learning the piano has its own rewards, and it does teach theory and other kinds of things. But the thing that I think what happened was that at some point the few times I did practice, I was starting to associate notes on the piano keyboard with, you could say, frequencies in my brain, that I would memorize them. Like a C sounds like this. That's what it's like. You'd say that's what its frequency is. So my brain would internalize that, and that's a C, that's a D flat, that's a whatever.
Wow.
I think that's how I developed that.
So speaking of developing, Lee, you at some point this is a terrible transition.
You did.
I'm gonna have the narrator do something there. No, but when did you move into like kind of using that D&D stuff into writing stories and books and stuff like that? Was that at the same time or later, or
that was
a transition?
Later. And there was a sort of a transition period between those two. We all kind of, when we all left for college. We'd still get together and play during holidays and the summer, but it was, that sort of consistency. There was not a consistent outlet.
Well, it seemed like before that, actually, the taping thing probably, making the comedy tapes and stuff like that probably was part of the transition before the writing thing.
Yeah. Well, and also a lot of that was like we started doing that our senior year of high school. And,
maybe let's step back just a second, because we've jumped over to the HHK years, which not everybody listening might know about. Most will, but so the way
all three of our listeners.
All three of our listeners.
Only two of them know.
Two of them know, but it's those other people we have to be watching out for, Phil.
Oh, they're watching out.
So, Lee, this started with Lee and myself. For many years, of course, I've been into electronics and AV equipment, things like that. And at some point, I got a hold of enough equipment, an old open reel tape recorder, some microphones, and we started screwing around with that. And I think even like Rob did this a little bit, and Sean was involved a little bit when we were kids. We'd have an old cassette recorder. We'd make goofy little tapes. A lot of kids probably did that. And pretend we were doing old radio shows, things like whatever. But at some point, Lee and I decided we were going to go to the next level and try and do something with like a plot, and that was at least somewhat planned out.
And sort of inspired by Firesign Theater.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was the template or the.
I'll put the
inspiration.
A link in the show notes to Firesign. A lot of people used to Fireside Theater. That was great. I'm not even sure what that was, but it was not this. And it was these four guys in the 60s and early 70s who made these high concept comedy albums, very counterculture of their time, things like that, but were brilliant, especially in satire, things like that. They're just amazing. But I think we were inspired by that, listening to them, and we can do something like that, I think was probably our thought. So we started that out, and shortly we made the first one, which is a satire one called The Burger Wars, which is this post-apocalyptic fantasy where McDonald's
way
is taking
before
over the
that
world.
was
and the rebel resistance was Burger King, and we did an entire half
Grimace,
hour, 40 minutes.
Grimace the Great, he was like the sort of Darth Vader henchman or something
very Star
of the
Wars
Emperor.
inspired, actually.
Yeah.
And,
Burger Wars, yeah.
And we that was our first thing, and it kind of we did that, and shortly after that, Phil was brought in.
So Lee and I were in study hall together, and I don't quite know what the purpose of the study hall was. I think we'd get like handouts and do. Oh, we get this little. You'd have to fill out these Scantron sheets for personality.
That might have been our first mutual joke.
I think the Scantron. That kind of where was the Don Pardo character came from. And we were making like Tara laugh, I think, on our table. And I think that was the main goal, is just to, well, we made each other laugh too, but.
They still have Scantron sheets, Phil.
Scantron. That's kind of where Don Pardo came from. And then at some point, Lee said, my friend John and I make tapes. I said, John Knowles? And because I had met John a little while before on what we've talked about that on here already, but. And, I remember him. And so then I went over and auditioned.
And you killed it.
Oh, yeah. We knew instantly that the game had been upped.
Well, I think
where'd this guy come from?
I think that, I don't know, because you guys had a thing going, and that was kind of I don't want to say risk or something, but it's, that could, bringing another person into something you've already established could screw it up. But
we were getting tired of doing all the voices.
Well, yeah, you were pretty much brought on as the main vocal talent. Lee wanted to do more of the writing. I was obviously doing the technical work and occasional awful Grimace voice and things like that.
Oh yeah, we all did voices, but
oh yeah, we all did. And then at some point after that, on the next one, Sean came over.
Yeah. Well, I think
which we talked about too, but
you did the making of Burger Wars. That
was that kind of pseudo follow-up thing that morphed into our first project together called Encounters of Our Kind.
It pretty quickly morphed into the other thing.
Yeah, it was more of a lead-in. It was never really quite finished, I don't think. I'm not sure how the making of Burger Wars was supposed to be its own standalone album, but sounds really boring. It was like bonus material.
We were having fun with it. Oh, what was the director? Phil? Or what was there? I can't remember.
Phil.
Mr. Phil?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's one I have not heard in a long time, but it's pretty rough.
That was based on something I did in a pep rally.
Really?
Ooh, I like it. Yeah, I don't know.
I didn't know that. Oh.
Well, Miss Saunders wanted, the first play I was in, she wanted me to go to the pep rally, which I hated pep rallies. And she's like, hey, we need to promote the play at the pep rally, and I want you to go speak. And I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? And she's like, well, just be funny. I'm like, oh, okay. So I didn't really practice anything or come up with any ideas before I got out there. But, you get up on the gym floor, and one of the cheerleaders or something handed me a microphone, and I was like, I can't believe they just handed me this microphone.
Big mistake.
But I didn't. So I just, it's like, hey, it's a play and it's got comedy and ooh, I don't know. But so I can't do the character voice now. I'd have to get into it. But and that's just, I don't know. People were laughing, and I don't really remember exactly what I did. It's one of those things. It's kind of like a zone when you're doing something. You do it, and you're you're getting the reaction from the audience and stuff. But it's just kind of happening. It's kind of scary, I guess. But then
you
you're
leave
later
your body and enter your audience.
Oh, that's not safe.
So anyway, these tapes we made, we made several of them. They got increasingly more complex. We did a lot of, for the time, pretty advanced tricks. Of course, just doing it on stereo tape recorders with just a couple of microphones and
sometimes boom boxes in the background.
Yeah, I mean, we did what you would call in the biz, bouncing of tracks. So you'd record one thing and then you'd play it back on another device while recording another set and song, because we did not have any extra tracks on the tape. It was a stereo, so there were lots of layering that we had to do, all very laboriously done. The one thing that's regrettable, even though it made it really fun at the time, was that we relied almost entirely on pre-recorded music that we had on records and CDs and whatever to do this stuff. And so a lot of it is like, we could never put it on the internet today because it would all have all this unlicensed music on it that we could never afford to legally use. So it's probably best left in obscurity.
Well, we could edit
but it was, similar to the D&D stuff. It was just extremely fun.
Yeah,
and we had a great
we laughed
time
so
making
hard,
it.
and
we spent hours just brainstorming names and ideas and stuff.
Yeah.
And then there was, early on, Lee would have an outline, or we'd have an outline developed together and kind of improvise on it and do a few takes. And Lee got more and more like actually writing scripts.
Yeah, by the later ones, we definitely had written out scripts, even if
a lot more writing was going on then.
No doubt. And we also did a lot of songs.
Yeah.
Which are not that unlike the ones we do on this podcast. Except we went through this phase where we did all these ones, especially when Sean came along and we had someone who could really sing besides Phil. So a lot of the early Beatles songs that are in stereo are in this kind of fake stereo where the voices are on one side and the instruments on the other. And we'd take advantage of that and basically do a karaoke, except we'd change the words and do that. So we did this whole series of basically Beatles covers with changed lyrics.
Yeah, like all the Lonely Bobs.
Which we actually used, but
we ruined Eleanor Rigby.
The famous one that got ruined for us is the Sgt. Pepper's song. You know what I'm talking about? When I'm 64, which we changed to After the Nuclear War.
Rob helped with the lyrics on that one.
Yeah, we did that, and to this day I can't hear that song without thinking of that.
Well,
there's like 50 versions.
There are. We famously could never quite get it the way we wanted it, and that was kind of our point where we disintegrated into.
It was very what we were trying to do. I got I don't know. I guess I got kind of perfectionist about it, but it was very complicated, and we didn't have multi-track recording and stuff, so we had to keep doing takes, and you'd get like 2/3 through it, and then one of us would make a mistake. We did it at two different locations, and we tried lots of different things.
One of the versions has Eric, I think, on a verse singing on it, and one other one has Rob.
That's one of the challenges. Probably was the personnel changes.
Well, then you had to kind of start over because people wanted to add their thing to it, which is that's where I got into like lyrics a lot more and stuff like that. So
yeah, and there were some things that came out, like just the things that jumped to my mind are like Bovine Baby and My Little Brother's the Antichrist,
which were originals. Those were not.
Yeah, and I mean those are like I think those are like just top notch things. I think like our sort of our stories, are in retrospect are more things we did for fun, but I'm not sure how successful a lot of it was. Some of it maybe, but yeah, there was some of the music that was more centered in you guys. Though I helped with lyrics. I did some lyrics a bit.
Yeah,
but that's kind of the strongest. I think that's the strongest stuff that we ended up producing.
No, I like some of the B.O.B. stuff is pretty cool. Still,
and even the theme song to this podcast had its, I think, genesis and
sure
in this little thing Phil did many years ago called the Laughing Trumpet, which maybe we can put on one of these as a bonus. But that it had that same kind of little little pattern. And also one of the funniest musical things I think we ever did was this thing. It was in one of the later random assorted shit episodes or shows where we just did a bunch of one-offs, and this was an ad for a product called the Jerry Lewis Crazy Condom.
Oh yeah.
And the song though for that
the ads were good. Yeah,
it's so funny. It's just this manic. I can't even describe it. To this day I still laugh my ass off when I hear that. It's so funny.
At some point, I bought a 4-track because it was hard to get. Then I just did all the voices.
Some more modern things. And you imagine what we could have done with what's available today. It's even on your most basic computer.
Other artists have talked about the, and this gets into creativity a little bit too, because sometimes when you're limited, it forces you to be more creative.
There is
like now,
to that. Yeah.
Like now on GarageBand, I have. I don't know, maybe endless tracks available that I could use. I don't even use the 4-track anymore, hardly. But,
I think the biggest thing beyond all the technical stuff is the fact that it's so much easier to edit things.
Oh, yeah.
Almost,
yeah.
But you could say to the detriment because, again...
Tweak it to death.
Yeah, you can tweak it to death, and it kind of gets you to be a little lazy.
Yeah, I'll fix it later.
Yeah, well, it's a joke. I'll edit this out, but...
Maybe that's what we should have called the podcast.
I'll edit this out. This podcast is only 13 seconds long.
Right.
But, I was going to say that, like with the technology, that this modern technology, the current technology is, of course, amazing. But I'm grateful we didn't have access to it. I'm concerned that if we had everything that they have today, we wouldn't have made tapes.
I think we would have
recorded songs.
We would have just dinked around more.
We wouldn't have done the campaign. I'm concerned that we just would be sitting around watching YouTube videos and playing video games. Because,
yes.
Especially the games. I mean, they're addictive. There's people that's the center of their life. And I don't know. I want to believe that we would have had the ability to just shut that off and walk away from it and create our own things. But when you have these very kind of hyper realized worlds and characters and action and how is some dice bouncing on a table and what's in your own mind and standing in front of a microphone, how would that really compare to it? At least until you could it would be hard to get to the point where you started to really feel the reward of it and get good enough at it that you're really feeling progress. I'm grateful that we had as little as we did in that sense. I shudder to think where I would be right now if I had all this stuff when I was a kid to distract me.
I think boredom comes into it when you're first starting. You want a creative outlet and stuff like that. But I remember I got my first tape recorder before I met you guys. It was just one of those, I don't know, they're flat and they're long and it's just a little
dictation recorder.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that.
And I would try to make tapes with that, and I'd have friends, and we didn't do it very often, but I think some of that was what's this thing, and you're kind of bored and you start playing with it and doing funny voices and but if I had a video game or something that I was playing, I probably would have just done that. I don't know, but see now as far as my kids go, they're on screens a lot, but they get bored with that at some point too. And, Adeline will go do some drawing, and April, my eldest, will get on. She makes music, electronic music, I guess you'd call it. Cause she's kind of more into ambient stuff. But I guess the thing is, even with all this crap on the internet and stuff, you still get bored of it. It just takes longer, Well, for one example, when we did the superhero thing, we were just coming up with names. How many hours did we spend coming up with names?
Oh.
But it went by so fast, and we were laughing so hard.
Oh, we also had the luxury of lots of time.
Well, that's the
Which,
thing.
of course, when
I
you're
mean,
young, you do.
But nowadays, you don't seem like you have enough time because there's so many other things that you could do, I guess. We'd drive around and mug up and
But you know what? At least
make each other laugh for hours.
We all had other things going on in our lives. We were both in school, or all three.
No, I dropped out.
Phil wasn't in school.
I was too school. I just showed up for the pep rallies.
Yeah, but no, we all had things
the
going
ladies.
on besides this. We didn't just play Lee and Rob, and the rest of us didn't just play the campaign all day. We also found time for activities and other things in school, and at least sometimes with our families. So
I don't think I did. I think it's more you guys. You had activities. I had no activities, and I still don't to this day. And I'm
Unless you're forced to.
I'm proud.
Like
you're,
we'll wake
you're
you
just
up.
the creative monk.
Yes.
Oh, you're not a cleric. You're a monk.
No, monks are way cooler, man.
Monk. Yeah.
Because they do ninja shit.
What do they have, like a mace or something? I don't
No,
know.
they just kill people with their hands and stuff. That's
Wow.
why people love to play monks, because they're holy and everything and mysterious, but they kill people with their hands.
Because they make all that bread back at the monastery. It really gets strong hands.
Yeah,
No.
right. They have magical powers.
Fine.
Okay, I'm going to switch gears. What is everybody drinking, if anything? It's 10 in the morning, so maybe nothing.
I'm drinking iced green tea. I was drinking coffee, but I switched over.
Excellent. Lee?
I'm drinking coffee from a mug with Grumpy the Dwarf on it on one side. On the other side, it says "I hate mornings."
Oh boy!
And I feel guilty about using this cup because, one of my sort of philosophical friends is Henry David Thoreau, who was a major morning was like a major theme of his, and so I always feel like he's judging me when I drink from this.
He was
cup.
the original morning person.
He was the original morning person. Yes, he said that.
He was so excited he didn't go to sleep at night.
It's like, if you're not there for the morning, you may as well be in the ground.
This could be Phil's patron saint.
No, I'm a morning person.
Grumpy the Dwarf?
Well, no, that's mine. No, Thoreau.
I'm a morning
Phil,
person.
you're forced to get up, though, aren't you?
Well, no, I still, even on Saturday or Sunday, I'll still wake up at 6 or something.
Yeah, well, me too.
I mean-
not me.
This was
I
kind
know
of early
Eric
for you to
Shipley.
record. Well, he doesn't get up before noon or something.
Not usually, I think.
I was trying to think the last time I slept until noon was probably in college.
Well,
Yeah,
I did.
I
I
kinda
did it
miss
a few
those
months
days.
ago, but it didn't go well. I definitely have to get up way before then.
I remember doing that was another thing that we would do, which is not unusual, of course, but we would be up till 2, 3, 4 in the morning.
Oh, sure.
I remember sleeping till noon or 1 or even 2 o'clock. I wish I could still do that. Now if I stay up till 2, I'll wake up at 6.
Yeah, I feel like shit.
Yeah.
Well, I am. I just finished my coffee, and I am actually having
Bourbon.
a burp. Not quite. I'm having some rye.
You are?
I poured a tiny bit, just for continuity's sake. So I'm sampling some Old Overholt bonded rye whiskey.
Oh, sure. I haven't had that yet.
So which Phil nicknames Old Voldemort, which is what I always say now, almost whenever I see it, because it's so.
Well,
funny.
I've actually ordered it.
Yeah, by that name, and
Do you have Old Voldemort? What?
it's kind of an old school bottom shelf rye whiskey. Back when rye was not in fashion, that was one of the few ones that you could get at the store. And it's a cheaper one. It's a plain looking bottle with a plastic cap on it and everything.
Some old white guy on there.
Yeah, it's some old colonial days, probably owned slaves and everything else. But last year or the year before, they came out with a bottled and bond version, which we will review. It has to be at least 100 proof by law and 4 years old and from one distillery. So it's kind of get a mark of quality, so to speak. It's actually pretty good. It doesn't have a lot of complexity to it, but it's a nice tasting really heavy flavor whiskey. I think it would make really good cocktail. I would say try it. It's still a pretty basic but high quality thing. So we can take a couple of minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Right back.
Whoop. Be back soon.
No music. Porch tire butter.
Hello.
Oh, hi.
Are you done with your break already?
Yeah, I'm back. I just had to fill up my coffee.
And then there's Lee.
And then there's Lee. And then there's Maud. Isn't that what that's from?
Well, yeah. Good old Maud.
So I've been rewatching random episodes of MASH, the TV show.
Yeah. Lon Wainwright's a character in there every now and then.
Yeah, the early ones. The thing that sticks out, I'm kind of in the middle of the series right now, and the people on it look so 70s, and it's supposed to be in the 50s, of course.
Yeah.
And like they had this episode with this injured soldier who's Puerto Rican, and he's just like, "Oh, come on, man! Oh, man, this is cool, man!"
Oh, wow.
It's like he's smoking a joint and stuff, and everybody's got kind of long hair and stuff. It's odd.
They definitely are not were army regiment or whatever.
Not. They did not look super. And some of it holds up. I mean, Alan Alda. It's the Alan Alda show, but still.
Well, it became that kind of.
Yeah, it sure was. This is like season 5 or something like that.
Oh, sure, he was doing writing and directing and everything. I think, at that point,
he was. And I still overall like the earliest ones better.
Sure.
I'm back.
Excellent.
Ladies and gentlemen, Lee is back. All right, good night.
Well, what else are we got?
Now what? I think we talked about everything, and then we took a break, and now we're done.
Did we have any?
Oh, no,
did
there's
we have
something
any
else to talk about.
topics?
Oh,
Yeah.
there's
Wait. No,
there's all kinds of things we could talk about.
Oh yeah.
And I can cover this, I think, relatively quickly. But Phil was asking about the transition between sort of my gaming, the role playing stuff, and writing. And
Thankfully, Lee came back here, so with a save the day, so to speak, of coming back from behind and scaring everyone from the front, from behind the front, which was called the back. And now we're all going to get back on track. Thank you, Lee, for being the guest and also staying on track and helping the boys not just talk about MASH or corn mash.
So the short version of that story is that, after went to college, we were playing games less and recording less. And over that time, I discovered sort of capital L, like literature and philosophy. And, as a younger person, of course, I read, the Lord of the Rings and sort of Shannara and Wizard of Earthsea and a lot of other things that I not pulling to mind right now. But, and I love that stuff. But then, 2 or 3 years into college, I just really got captured by this sort of bigger, larger scale stuff that had a lot more to do with kind of the nature of human existence and the meaning of the universe, those sorts of thoughts and questions and stories, which I think were also in, they're in the earlier things too that I was interested in, but in a different, more kind of profound and ambitious and comprehensive way. And so, I got caught up in that, and that was a much more personal or isolating sort of thing. It wasn't something I could easily do with other people.
No.
And, there were classes, but I mean, those were not... The classes themselves or the professors were not particularly helpful or rewarding, but the content was. Eventually, I did start writing my own books, and so, but where it's... That process was basically me trying to find a way to bring these sorts of, quote-unquote literary or philosophical, these bigger picture things into a form that would be like accessible or interesting to people. So, all my efforts were like, I wrote 2 novels ahead of the project I'm working on now, and they were both kind of fantasy-like, but they didn't work. So they were kind of failed efforts. So what I'm doing now is, I hope that's what I'm doing. I've kind of taken all the stuff that I learned, and I'm trying to make a fantasy story that incorporates a lot of that. So in an effort to kind of have it both ways, so kind of going back to my roots in a way.
Walls of Covenant.
Yeah, The Walls of Covenant is the name of the series, and the first book's done and out, and the second one I'm working hard on, and that I'm hoping to have that out and published December.
That's great.
Yep, then 3 more books to go, and hopefully it'll be done in the next 10 years.
So 5 books, that's a septology? What is that called?
Is it a quintology? I'm not quite sure what it would be.
No.
Quintilogy?
Not sure what it would be.
Quintilogy.
Yeah.
No, whatever.
But apparently, like, all these stories have had a very strong epic element. And, the campaign that we did was an epic. And so, there's an epic element to my constitution, that this sort of, a really big story, a really big picture.
Go big or go home.
Yeah, it's like that's my kind of philosophy and my impulse, and we have our kind of one shot here, and that's what I've kind of decided to focus on.
Well, and it obviously speaks to you, so.
Oh yeah, no, it's I'm compelled to do it. It's not. I don't feel like it's a choice. It's my orientation. I was born this way.
That's right. So you being you.
And of course, I've been lucky too. I don't want to say lucky, I mean, I could have ended up having kids and didn't, and that would have been, I'm sure if I would have had children, it would have been like, it would be unimaginable not to have had them. But, ending up not having children obviously opens up a lot of time, opens up resources.
No doubt.
And I, purposefully avoided anything like a career, anything that would be like a major commitment.
So you did the saving throw there, I think is what that's called.
Mm-hmm. Something
no?
Like that, yeah.
Save versus career.
Save versus career. Save versus responsibility.
Oh!
Oh, no.
Well, the balance between responsibility and creativity is challenging for everyone in their own way. So
that would be
trying to drag me into
podcast,
adventure.
Probably.
No, you're trying to lead me into adventure. That's what it is.
Lee?
Yes.
You're trying to lead
lead
into adventure. Oh.
Lead Deadwood. Yeah. Hey, let's talk about Rapid City some more.
No.
I think we exhausted that pretty thoroughly.
Well, I don't know Lee's thoughts on Rapid City.
Our last episode had a ton of Rapid City stuff in it.
My thoughts on Rapid City were exhausted by the late 80s.
That seems to be our thing too.
We probably haven't gotten much farther than that.
Well, no.
We all kind of left.
It's funny. Our last episode with Heather, which isn't quite out yet, had tons of that, and she left about the same time we did, and also lives in Minnesota. And there's other folks around that I keep discovering live here too. That, as you call them, expats.
Well,
or refugees or whatever.
I think when you grow up in a place like that, And there are still people that live there and are creative and stuff, or people that have left and then came back. That seems to be a good scenario.
Well, like my sisters, for example.
But
That's Rapid City. I'm gonna.
It's killing Phil's brain even as we.
He doesn't even go there anymore. I still have
toxic.
No, what I was going to say there, we'll edit that. I was going to say that people that were at least at that time with creative, you either went to Denver or the Twin Cities. I mean, it seemed like, or if you were gay or something, you had to leave. But
they took you to the edge of town.
All right, get out of here. Here's $50 for a Greyhound bus.
So speaking of the Old West, I've mentioned a number of times that I watch lots of old movies, and that's been something I definitely inherited from my late father, blah, blah, blah. One of the old movie genres that I'm a little deficient in is the Western. Kind of, I think my dad didn't love them, so I kind of, for various reasons, got a distaste for them. And I've been trying to at least selectively go back and watch some of the important ones in the genre. And that's led me to a mini project, besides just trying to get a lot of the really considered classic ones watched, is that I'm going to try and watch all of the variations on the Wyatt Earp OK Corral story that have been filmed. Because
there's like 3.
Well, I settled on
more than 3. You
core
picked 3
ones. There are actually more. There was at least one made in the silent era when Wyatt Earp was actually still alive and living in Hollywood, which is really kind of funny. Weird. But apparently he was actually, he hung around and was an advisor or something like that. But the 3 I'm going to try and focus on are the 1949 John Ford My Darling Clementine. That's with Henry Fonda playing Wyatt Earp. That's a very well-known classic. And 1959, John Sturges directed Gunfight at the OK Corral. That's kind of a late 50s big color widescreen epic with Kirk Douglas and Burt Lancaster. And then there's another one which I've heard many people rave about, which is called Hour of the Gun, which was made in 1968, I think, or 67 maybe. And that one is starring, it's a blank now. Rockford Files guy.
James
Garner, yeah. And Jason Robards and some other famous people. And that one's supposed to be good too, which and supposedly the one that's most accurate to the historical story is the latest one. And so I thought it'd be interesting to see how they all handle the subject, and they're all just, it was obviously a story that Hollywood liked to retell, and so it'll be interesting how it gets done, because the Western changed a lot in those different decades on how, because the Western is always one of those things that more reflected American cultural attitudes, I think, at the time. And that's the part of it that's kind of interesting to me, is how that changed, because it was a very popular form of movies, and actually popular books, I think, too, for a long time.
And they would sneak in reference. I think in a way it was like any genre, like science fiction or something. They'd slip in, moral things within the. They used Westerns as a vehicle sometimes to get these other points across.
Yeah, there definitely was a lot of that. And then as they got the 1950s and into the 60s, it morphed quite a bit into this reflection of how America has changed and things like that, or how the open West as a mythical place of lawlessness and freedom, really, if you want to get ideological or whatever about it, how that has gone away or is dying and things like that. Even famous movies like The Wild Bunch, which I think you guys have seen, has a statement about that, and how, because it's about these old action men of action who are kind of facing their retirements or deaths, things like that. And the whole genre though has a lot more substance to it, if under the surface, than I I think I used to give it credit for. So I'm looking forward to that.
Sure.
Again, it's pretty easy to look down on the genre in a way, because growing up, it was all around us in that Western South Dakota cowboy bullshit. There's so much of that out there.
Rockerville.
It's just easy to dismiss it, I think. And I think there's a lot more too. At least that so far, that's been my view. We'll see as I watch more of them, if that bears out or not, or whether maybe it is still bullshit. I don't know.
Well, another thing that came out of Westerns was like voices. I mean, there are a lot of usually the weird little side characters. And that kind of character was always the cook or something.
And a lot of it's interesting because I'm kind of speaking on my butt on this because I don't have anything to back it up, but I get this impression that in some really tiny ways, the Western movie dealt with American racism a little bit more than most other types of movies did in those days. Mainly because of the way different ways they would use the American Indians as characters or just generic threats, things like that. Like in one of the Westerns I watched recently or rewatched, because I had seen it, is the 1939 Stagecoach, which is the movie that made John Wayne a star. And that is actually a great movie to watch if you ever want just one classic Western to watch. That's probably the best one. And the Native Americans in there are not actual characters. They're more like Sandstorm or the weather or something. They're just this force that the heroes have to overcome. And even though I think Geronimo is named in there or something like that, but really they're not characters at all. And
if they were, they'd be played by a white person.
It's ironically
not
in
always,
this movie
though.
They are not. They're actually played by
I meant if they had a main character.
Yeah, no, that's
not
right.
Always.
Most of the time, if they had speaking roles, they were played by whites. That was very true.
There were a couple. Unlike in the real Wild West, there were a lot of African American cowboys and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, it's way more. There's way more to it than you ever saw in the films. But I think the way that the stories treat the American Indians and other and especially people from Mexico and other things, because they show up a lot. Like even in Stagecoach, one of the side characters talks about how he's married to a Mexican woman, and he goes on and on about how big her family is and stuff like that. It's really played for laughs, but it's an interesting detail that they actually have the character go into.
Well, that's why that's why he does that job.
Yeah,
right. Escape him every now and then.
So one of the characters said, "Well, why do you do this dangerous stagecoach run all the time through all these hostile territories?" And the guy basically like, "Well, I have this big family I have to support because I married this Mexican woman."
I thought maybe he was trying to escape him, but he's trying to support it. Okay.
It's never quite that. It's I mean, yes, this is all really relative, and there's tons of misogyny and racism all over the place in these things. Let's not be realistic or ridiculous, but yeah, that's the thing that it's like we talked about before. You have to I think to appreciate a lot the bulk of old Hollywood, you have to kind of filter a lot of that out, or at least put it in context to appreciate it. But I still find a lot of it entertaining, and I also appreciate it on a historical level, just because I think it's important to see what the culture was like and how it was portrayed in popular media. So
it's good not to be like too puritanical about these things. I mean, it matters, the racism or the sexism, and it's not irrelevant, but
right. And yes, it does sort of stand out, and I it's not like I don't see it
within the context of the time that they were.
And again, there's degrees of it too, and some of it is I think we all would agree that America was much more racist and everything than they are today, even though there's still plenty of it around. But there's degrees, like, basically I can't sit through I could not sit through a screening of Birth of a Nation today, for example. Which is an extreme example, of course, but
I mean, except for just kind of a film history.
Yeah, you would have to really have
perspective.
a detachment to really do it, but you would not, find it entertaining from that standpoint.
Well, in the latest Spike Lee movie,
Black Klansman.
There's a scene where the people are watching that movie, and they're just the one lady is just loving it. She's
and it was extremely popular at the time, too. That's what it was a blockbuster movie.
Like maybe the first one that was
exactly, and Woodrow Wilson played it in the White House.
Yeah.
So nasty, but so anyway, that getting into the weeds on that, but it's
maybe
I'll report
maybe
back
we can
when I've
talk
gotten
about
those watched. And
if I watch them, or Rob might watch them too, I guess.
That's I think that'll be interesting. Little experiment to do that.
One other interesting thing is how like genre, like the expectations of genres sort of shift, because I've gotten the impression that a lot of like more recent westerns, they're just like almost just brutally dark.
Yeah.
And they weren't always like that. I mean, there was always action and suspense and tension and all that, right?
No, they could be
important.
very light though. Yes.
Yeah, but just this sense that if you're going to see a western, you better be ready to see just unrelenting darkness, and to kind of half regret being a human being, and just kind of in the same way like with science fiction, that a lot of science fiction stuff I felt like over time it's like science fiction became like a horror genre.
Oh yeah, extremely.
And probably because the effect, and it's probably the effect of Alien was so influential, and with the Western stuff, maybe Unforgiven, or started kind of turning these genres in a particular direction that is not required, and is maybe worse actually for the storytelling.
The Western also kind of was the first genre in movies that I know of, except maybe film noir, which is another one. At least it's in the title that it's going to be dark, but but it was one of the earlier genres to introduce what we call the anti-hero. And that's something that you saw that in the 1950s for sure, which is, again, noir had it too, but it was even a little more subversive, I think, in the Western, because of the way that genre had such pure, morally black and white characters.
Yep.
And so having somebody who was actually pretty flawed human being. I mean, if you there are so many examples, but one of the canonical ones that people is the John Wayne film The Searchers. You guys know that one?
Oh yeah.
That movie has all sorts of pretty deep issues if you look at it very closely.
Huh. I don't know I don't think I've seen that.
Yeah, it's very, very good, but it's definitely it has some creep to it for sure.
Yeah, doesn't it like kind of explicitly address the racism issue?
Absolutely.
The John Wayne character is like kind of out for vengeance or something.
He's out for vengeance, and because his his niece, I think, is kidnapped as a girl, and rather than her being corrupted by them, he's out to murder her. That's the story. It's very. I mean, this is 1950s still when this was made.
Jeez.
This is pretty dark stuff. and it's like he and Jeffrey Hunter, if you remember him, he was the original Captain Pike in Star Trek, or basically spent half the movie trying to chase this American Indian tribe around to try and hunt her down, and they have lots of time to discuss what the motives are, and it's a really interesting movie. And it's also surprising that it was as popular as it was, because it's pretty grim. Because the John Wayne character is it starts the movie as being pretty damaged, really. And of course, a lot of that is because most of these take place just after the Civil War, and there's lots of obvious baggage from that they that the writers, I think, built in.
Another thing that Lee's been doing lately is kind of a project, is more on his. I think it's more of his dad's fault, but. You're going around to these Civil War sites. I think that's pretty interesting.
Oh,
speaking
yeah.
of
that's
speaking of the old days in history. But so where have you been? Are you going anywhere this year? Where have you been so far?
No, we're not going anywhere this year. At least that I know of yet.
It might happen.
So we've been to like a number of battlefields and sites. So we've been to Gettysburg is the big one, and also to Antietam, which is in Maryland. Went to Harper's Ferry, where John Brown did his famous failed raid to try to ignite a slave rebellion. We went to the battlefield of Shiloh, which is in Tennessee, just barely over the border from Mississippi. Went to Springfield, Illinois, where Lincoln lived.
Yeah.
And also the capital of the state, and there's a great Lincoln Museum. Sad things happen, and then sometimes it opens up new things. So my mother passed away 5 or 6 years ago. But one of the things that opened up is my father and I going on these trips, just he and I together, which we probably wouldn't have, maybe we would have done it, but easily maybe not. Would have been more of a larger family thing instead of just he and I. Unfortunately, we have this thing that we're both really interested in, so we could go on these trips and spend 3 days wandering around a battlefield and not get bored, and not have one person going, oh, and is this going to end, and let's go do something else, and or spending time in a museum and just looking at all the artifacts and reading most of the stuff. And so that's been a very wonderful thing to be able to share and experience with my dad. And also, it's just for me a really fascinating topic. I'm not terribly interested in the battles per se. I mean, they're interesting, but they're just absolutely horrifying. I think a lot of the people, a lot of the romance around this stuff. I think anybody who, if you were actually there watching this, you'd be sick, and it's absolutely horrifying what these men went through. And so I don't feel any. I don't get a.
You don't romanticize it.
Yeah, I don't get a happy thrill about it, or want to dress up in uniform and pretend to be one of them. To me, that's like dressing up like a cow and pretending to go to the slaughterhouse. That's if that's the sort of reenactment you want to do, I guess. But to me, it's about the same thing.
Well, a lot of those battles, that's what it was.
Yeah, and so but for me, what my interest in it was more kind of what was in people's heads, like how did this happen, and what were people thinking, and their perceptions and their picture of the world, and things that had happened in our history that brought us to that point. More than just the details of the battles, because they're all kind of the same on a certain level. The battles. Just maneuvering to try and cut each other down.
Or lots of waiting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure. Yeah. Lots of waiting. There was a lot of boredom and
for
marching
years.
And yeah. It was
that one
romantic.
general would never attack the one northern guy. Well, see, when you were talking about this a little bit, it prompted me to actually go and watch the Civil War Ken Burns thing, because I'd never seen that.
Did you watch the whole thing, Phil?
I did. My favorite.
Wow,
I like to rewatch it.
I like Shelby Foote. I like his voice a lot. Jody and I will sit around and listen to Shelby Foote for hours.
Yeah.
We could just.
He sort of made it. He sort of made the show. I think he kind of.
I loved his voice. Well, his stories too were really the kind of wry way he'd end the stories sometimes was. I don't know. I can't think of an example, but it was very funny.
Yeah, he was also a novelist, so. And he wrote a very big history of the Civil War.
Now he had some good stories.
And it's also fascinating to think about how it's we're still living with the effects of it.
Yeah,
obviously, and it's still
the South
totally
South actually won. I didn't realize that was going to happen, but
not entirely.
No, I mean,
I'm ready. I'm ready to enlist again if we have to. But one other. Oh, and also Vicksburg. So Vicksburg, Mississippi, which is the last place we went to last year, where Vicksburg was a very important city on the Mississippi River that helped connect kind of the eastern and western sides of the Confederacy. So it was a big target for the North because they wanted to capture it and cut off that, cut the Confederacy in half. And Vicksburg is just a wonderful little town. But one of the things that struck me about being there and kind of learning a little bit, like looking at some of the demographics, is that, people, we Yankees tend to have this kind of dismissive attitude towards the South, and we sort of like lump everybody in the South together, and like these sort of general things like I'm forgetting his name, like General Sherman. He did this kind of famous / infamous March to the Sea where he went through the South and burned and destroyed a lot of things. You hear a lot of people say, "Oh, well, Southerners they don't like Sherman," but what kind of bothers me about that is that it's like totally erasing African Americans from the South.
Right.
Mississippi at the time of the Civil War was majority African American. To this day, Mississippi has the largest African American as a percentage population. It's like 36-37%. And that's about the percentage that Hillary Clinton won in 2016. So, there are millions of people that live in the South that are not quote unquote Southerners in the stereotypical sense. And so they count too, and there are white Southerners that are not, that are more enlightened and in Vicksburg, it's majority African American. The mayor is African American. The police chief's African American. From what I saw, everybody seemed to get along okay.
Well, and that's from a political aspect, that's maybe a byproduct of our system. A certain group is able to maintain political power at least at the state level, and then at the national level, even if at the local level it might be different.
Yeah, and also like Vicksburg is it's got a lot of this tourism from the battlefield, from the military park right there, and historically it was pretty cosmopolitan. There were people, many languages spoken there, and people. It was like 40% foreign born or something like that, and the people in that area actually voted against seceding from the Union, which is not surprising because they were really tied in. They're right there on the Mississippi. It's a big port.
Yeah.
So they were, they were more interested in keeping the trade going than
right. It was their interest
than fighting a war. But so there's this complexity. Another detail on that is there's this beautiful monument in the military park to African American soldiers who fought in the Civil War. I think it's like the 1st Mississippi Regiment, and they fought for the North, but they actually saw combat in Mississippi. And there's this gorgeous monument, and it's like 3 men, and I think at least one of them is a soldier, one of them's an escaped slave, maybe another one's supposed to be kind of a current slave. I forget exactly how that's divided. So it's this gorgeous monument that was paid for by the state of Mississippi, and also with a little bit of Vicksburg, the town of Vicksburg also chipped in. So I was kind of surprised to see that. Almost think like, that Mississippi wouldn't spend.
They'll only have General Lee statues.
Yeah,
right.
It's a bunch of crackers.
Yeah, so there's, I'm sure there's a long ways to go, but there's been a lot of progress.
Oh, that's heartening.
And and we don't, and like I was kind of going towards this that Vicksburg is kind of a touristy place, so there's a lot of, they're kind of more open. I didn't get out into the boonies and drop in on some relatively isolated town and see what people think or how people behave, but I liked Mississippi. So that was the second time I spent some time there. And
I think a lot of people say that state has a lot of natural beauty too. Yeah, well, this area, this Vicksburg, is so fascinating because it's built on these almost cliffs, so it's very rugged. Some of the steepest roads I've ever seen in that town, and that's why it was so hard for the Union to capture it. It was very, it was the terrain around there is kind of like a fortress,
a natural fortress.
Yeah. So, yeah, but it was really, I was we were really surprised and impressed at everything that was there, and these military parks where they try and preserve the battlefield are really interesting. And one of the most surprising things about these parks, if you're not familiar with them or you've never been to one, is the amount of monuments. There's like hundreds of monuments and markers, like at Gettysburg, maybe thousands. And these were like set up by actual survivors of the Civil War who came back later to dedicate, a monument to their regiment or to their leader, their officer. And so there's like, pedestals with heads on them, with representations of generals and colonels, and there's monuments sometimes, huge, honoring, a particular regiment or a particular, state. And some of these monuments are just breathtakingly beautiful, and it's really fun to think about, and they're placed often like right where this regiment did their biggest thing. And so the people, they came back years later and said, yeah, this is where it happened. This is where we attacked up this hill. And so they were to put the monument right here to our fallen comrades. And so there's a lot of history and also sort of, memory. And that's the stuff that I like more. And also just, there's something sacred about being in a place where something happened, where something momentous happened, and what these men went through. So, it's a kind of a religious, contemplative experience as well. And I think my dad was in tune with that as well. And yeah, we would oftentimes just marvel that people would actually do this, that people would actually, march a mile across a field with cannons and rifle fire blowing people all around you to bits, and you just keep marching and you keep marching and you keep marching in the direction of the guns. And it's either brave or insane, I guess, depending on how you want to look at it. But I guess we should say brave for the memory of the people. And they were being loyal to the people on either side of them. It's probably the biggest motivator.
Right, you don't want to let your comrades down.
Yeah.
It may be even more than your country or whatever, because it kind of gets down to the local level where you're
I think a lot of times
I'm going to help this
get
guy.
A little cynical about the bigger picture stuff.
It sounds like
too busy with dealing with what's right in front of them and what the
shit.
Next thing to do is. Yeah.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot for coming on, Mr. Lee.
Yeah. I'm glad we finally were able to pull it together.
Well, we had a whole episode. We were waiting for you.
Yeah.
That was
thank
a classic.
you. It's I don't know. It's different recording in the morning, and but
It's more somber.
Is it?
Well, maybe it was just the topic.
I'm sorry.
No, it was great. I really, really enjoyed hearing.
No,
about
I love the. Well, I kind of steered it that way, but I love the. We can have variety in here. We don't have to just have a yuck fest. But okay, wait. Let's talk about Rapid City a little bit before. No, I'm kidding. Okay.
and Taco John's. Yeah.
Taco Lee.
They ought to be sponsoring us. Damn it.
Oh. Again, Lee's book, the first book is actually available for purchase. Walls of Covenant. What's the first book's name again?
The first book, the subtitle is The Raising of the Troop. So it's
Raising of the Troop.
I will put a link in there.
The five main characters.
Excellent. So we can log roll for Lee a little bit.
Yeah.
What I'm really looking forward to
I'm the worst marketer ever. So
what I'm looking forward to the books is when you're all done, and then somebody else comes along and makes the prequel. No, I'm kidding. All right. No, I'm waiting for that. No, I'm kidding. All right.
I'm waiting for
everyone.
the prequel.
All right. Let's stop recording.
No. Hi. This is Phil. I'm one of the hosts of this podcast called Time to Lean, and here's a song. This is the part of the show where we have a song. Lee had mentioned a song, and we're going to put that on. And it's called My Little Brother's the Antichrist. It was, we can't find the original we did. It was me singing over all of us doing a cappella instruments. Anyway, so we decided to try to recreate it. It turned out quite a bit different. But anyway, I hope you enjoy it.
And here's the song!
My little brother's the Antichrist. He's really out of control. My little brother's the Antichrist. He's gonna get your soul. He's the bastard son of a jackal. We gotta keep him in the closet and shackles. Cause when he goes outside, all the neighbors run and hide. My little brother's the Antichrist. He's really out of control. My little brother's the Antichrist. He's gonna get your soul. When he started school, he got beat up cause it wasn't cool. But he snuffed out their wigs when he showed them that 666. My little brother's the Antichrist. He's really out of control. My little brother's the Antichrist. He's gonna get your soul. When he was getting older, he got a great big chip on his shoulder. When your dad's met the police, you know you're a big cheese. My little brother's the Antichrist. He's really out of control. My little brother's the Antichrist. He's gonna get your soul. My little brother's the Antichrist, really out of control. My little brother's the Antichrist, he's gonna get your soul. Someone tried to get him in trouble, he'd burst Ariel's a bubble. He'd turn his head around, and he would hear the sound. My little brother's the Antichrist, he's really out of control. My little brother's the Antichrist, he's gonna get your soul. He's gonna get your soul. He's gonna get your soul. He's gonna get your soul.